3 lanes, 5 enemies, 1 Titan. Kill it, and you win. But as we all know, there has never been and never will be a single match that's simple. In those 3 lanes, we have 2 towers, 1 Phoenix, and an enemy team staring you in the eyes and waiting to stomp your head in. Or maybe they're waiting in the grass if they're shy. No matter the social confidence of your enemies, there's one thing you can be sure of. Every player in that match has their role. And with that role comes a whole slew of responsibilities. For mid laners, that's to blow your insides outside. Junglers are there to set up great ganks and help their team snowball a match. ADCs hold left click. And supports, well they you see support, they do damage? No, that can't be right. And yet in the current state of Smite 2, it's often your best choice. And I kinda love it. Maybe you do too, but that doesn't mean that it's healthy for the balance of the game. Now we'll get to that, but before we do, I want to talk about why high protection tanky supports feel so terrible right now. I have my reasons for why I think high prot builds have felt so terrible in Smite 2, and to be clear, these are just my opinions, and I'd love to get it out of the way now that if you disagree, that's fine. I'm more than open and would love to discuss with anyone willing to do so in a respectful and chill way. So just keep that in mind before you leave your angry comment about how you're the top full tank Jeb in the world who can single-handedly roll out and get a pentakill. I'm really proud of you, but to be honest, I also don't really care. Now, that out of the way, let's talk about prot builds. Saying prot builds is kind of a new thing when it comes to Smite support. Historically, it came with the territory. Your job was to be that frontline for a team. Especially looking back to Smite 1, that's what made it so interesting when a Naja or Nox would sneak their way into the support meta and do it well, because those normally squishy characters finding ways to adapt the role to a less rigid playstyle of only being that frontline was incredibly fun. However, in Smite 2, that has become a thing of the past. Scaling has changed massively in this game, and Hi-Rez has made it abundantly clear that they want every character to have the potential to build however they'd like and still succeed. I think this is something the community has slept on and are starting to realize in a way that is shifting us into this full damage support landscape. When it comes to my own personal experience, I have used support Hecate and Nuwa in my rank climb to large degrees of success. And while I tend to build them in more of a bruiser style, the option for me to forego my team's well-being and focus solely on being a destructive force is always within grasp. The thing is, when you do choose to build 80 to 100% tank items, you start to feel useless. And the biggest part of that, in my opinion, comes to another way that Hi-Rez has changed stats and scaling. Stats in Smite 1 had hard caps, and what that meant is once you hit a certain percentage for that stat, it couldn't be taken over that percentage. So for example, cooldowns were hard capped to 40% in Smite 1, and anything more than that was useless. In Smite 2, however, you can overcap a stat, although once reaching that soft cap, they start coalescing diminishing returns. To go back to our cooldown and raid example, it soft caps at 40%, yet more can be built and you can benefit off of it. Now, this is something I do often, and I've even shown off to you all in content such as my Hecate support build that I just uploaded recently. While these stats being only soft caps brings new levels of fun to the game and much more variety and creativity to the ways you can build, it also as well, with all causes, has effects. Now, I bring this all up to talk about another stat that behaves in the same way, penetration. And while first and foremost it is what I was doing to your mom last night, it's also a dangerous stat that we have as players. First of all, we have to remember that penetration in Smite 2 is much easier to build, mostly due to it being on a wider variety of items, and the fact that many gods are hybrid scalers. This means that there are many gods in the game that can tap into and utilize the penetration stats from strength and intelligence items. This ease of acquiring such a strong stat is a double-edged sword. On one hand, you feel like even the supports can't stand up to you, making you feel truly godly. But on the other hand, when you are that support, you feel like no matter what you do, whether it's to play slow, play fast, get up in their cheeks, or play the backlines, you get melted. Eventually, this leads players to where we are now. Why should I even waste my time building the protections if they're so useless anyways? The support says, and so they don't. They opt for other items, namely damage items. However, there is more to this than just uncapped penetration. I know we've all had long matches before, and recently a change was made to the game that was, I believe, intended to make those matches end quicker. 3k potions are now stackable. And that begs the question, well, what do they do? Well, consuming an elixir of intelligence grants you 120 intelligence, and an elixir of strength grants you 75 strength. And those are stackable, with no diminishing returns. The thought process is pretty simple. The match is going on for too long? Well, let them hit harder, which is great until you realize that this makes the tanky characters feel like useless members of the team once you get to this stage of a game. Because once you do get to these points, you can't outlive any fights. And conversely, you can't fight back into them because you simply don't have the build for it. And by that time, it would take resources that you don't have to change your entire build to be damage oriented. This isn't even bringing up the fact that 3k defense potions don't exist in Smite 2. In Smite 1, you could get 3k pots to bolster your power, but you had the option to get a 3k defense pot as well. This gave you the flexible ability to stay on semi-even ground with the damage dealers and not feel like nothing more than a glorified punching bag. Now, the two reasons I've covered already are, in my opinion, the biggest problems plaguing high prot supports at the moment, but there are a few more I'd like to touch on before we move on. Now, we've already talked about how the scaling has changed tremendously in Smite 2. The biggest contributor to that is something I touched on already. High res intended in Smite 2 for characters to be able to play more than one role and to be able to play more than one role well. This, I believe, has led them to overscale some characters. I'll use Hecate as an example as I have a ton of experience on her. She's an amazing mid laner. She hits hard, she has good area control and denial, she can shield herself and allies, and misplace enemies. She's basically the total package. At least she would be, but the actual total package is my girlfriend. Sorry, Hecate, you just can't compete. Now, all those things, though, they make her a great candidate for support just as much as they let her flourish in mid. And if you disagree, then you're disagreeing with the people making the game, because even high-res places her front and center on the list of supports. Now, when I play Hecate in support, I opt for a bruiser build, usually with 2 damage items. I use her aspect with things like Warrior's Axe and Glad Shield to continuously proc my items and score free damage. But this isn't the only thing pounding my enemies. I probably could have phrased that better, but nonetheless, the atomization is only one part of it. Hecate is a character that even with low amounts of intelligence has great base scaling, to the point that you're still hitting decently hard mixed with hitting extremely often. Now, there are many characters that can do this well, and I think it may not be something you can totally fix, nor should they, but I'll talk more about that later on. Next up, I want to talk about towers and especially phoenixes. They hit you harder than my dad after a few drinks, especially as shots stack up. Oftentimes, even when I'm facing a heavy physical damage team and build several defense items accordingly for them, I still feel as though birds are hitting me way too hard by the third or so shot. Now, don't get me wrong, I love that these objectives put up a fight, and they need to be strong. However, when I build for that exact scenario, I want to feel rewarded for it. In Smite 2 currently, it doesn't feel as though that happens, which is hilarious to me considering how much of a pushover the final objective of the game, the Titan, is. I can waltz in and tank that thing up with nearly any build, but that's a discussion for another day. For now, let's talk about the last thing in this section, which is that high health builds honestly feel way better than high prot builds do, even in niche size. Now, these stats often go hand in hand, but not always, especially with items such as Gem of Isolation, which has quickly become one of my favorite support items in the game, or Yogi's Necklace, another rising star in some of my builds. Oftentimes nowadays, the best solution as a support feels like it's to just slam the biggest health bar you can with great regen to back it up. After all, doing so allows you to stay out of base longer while taking several small scraps and skirmishes over doing one big fully committed fight that can quickly catch you losing. From the length of this section, I hope you see that there are many layers to this situation, but now that we've covered the core reasons bringing us to where we are now, we're one step closer to talking about if our current meta is truly unhealthy for the game and how we could fix it. But first we need to talk about... Hey, you! Yeah, you! Let me guess, you like Smite, huh? Well, if you do and you want to get some nice deals on gems or diamonds, and you want to support a nice small creator while you're at it, well, consider going to the Smite Nexus and using my code Roger to go ahead and support me. I would really appreciate that. And while you're at it, if you need some energy to get that done, why not go ahead and head over to advanced.gg and buy yourself some of that beautiful product right there, while also using code Roger10 at checkout. Get yourself a nice little discount on me, my friend. I mean, what can I say? It's just a kind of grateful guy I am. Or if you want to get to those sites any quicker, go ahead and use my links down in the description. I think that'll help you out, and it's the easiest way you can go ahead and support me as a small creator. I would really appreciate that. But I'm sorry for hacking into the video to do this shameless plug, and trust me, it is very shameless. But let's go ahead. I'll get you back into the actual content. In the beginning of this video, we talked about how every role has their own responsibilities. For a team to run smoothly, everyone has to be carrying out their duties. Now, I think there are some responsibilities that have become synonymous with support. Being tankier and able to take hits is the first thing that comes to mind. You are the one that is looked at to initiate and set up a fight. With your extra tankiness, you can shove your face into an enemy and survive their damage as your team unleashes tenfold upon them. Setting up these picks is what makes a great support. Beyond that, a huge responsibility of the support is to tank objectives. This includes simple things such as waves of minions, to the Gold Fury, Fire Giants, Towers, Phoenixes, and of course, the Titan. Now, keeping your team's health bars up by sacrificing your own is a required job, and one that makes games possible. There are some more responsibilities for a support to take on than these, but as these are the two most harshly affected by where the support meta is heading, I want to talk about them first and foremost. When you don't have those prots on you, as the support, those objectives suddenly become much more difficult, though not impossible. The priority instead shifts to things like minion management to drop backdoor protections, and tank for you as you secure the towers and birds, and focus more so on zoning and picking enemies than tanking. Objectives like Fire Giant rest more so on you allowing a tankier solo laner, or maybe even a higher lifesteal teammate to tank while you instead zone the enemies, or even juggling the objective between the team to share in the tanking job. While these are all possible, especially on teams of higher skill and communication, it begs the question, is it how support should be played? Is the support at that point doing their job? Now, I think you can argue in either direction and easily make great points, but the fact remains that there will always be more than one way to do things, and maybe those new ways are not lesser than, but simply an evolution of the game thus far unseen. Honestly, I myself don't know where I land on that discussion and would love to hear your thoughts on them to get more of a general consensus of at least where my community's heads are at. Should we set ourselves in these rigid expectations of what a role is to carry out, or should we be looking to and get excited about the roles evolving into new ways of play? After all, let's take double jungling for example, a strategy where the support builds a jungle starter and focuses on clearing the jungle and ganking more than they do on duo lane. Now this is a strategy that can be hard to pull off, but it can result in quick snowball games that end fast when done right. However, many players, myself included, look down upon this playstyle. For the most part because it takes you away from what has become expected of you as a support, and takes away from the team what they often need, that being a frontline, peel, and initiation. The full damage support meta leads us to a similar split in the road. Is the support truly doing their job if that job suddenly has itself being split among the rest of the team to a large degree? Now, I've been a support main nearly since the beginning of my Smite lifespan, and I've played since the beta of Smite 1. The reason I love the role and what I consider to be my job is to peel my teammates, set them up with kills, and tank whatever objective they need tanked. I will die 10 times out of 10 with no second thought if it means saving my teammate. My favorite gods to support on in Smite 1 after all were Ganesha and Khepri, because to me, nothing feels better than hitting that last second Khepri res on a teammate thinking they just threw their life away, or granting someone a kill by last hitting an out of range enemy on Ganesh. Even in Smite 1 though, I enjoyed higher damage supports. My first video on Smite after all was a Nuwa support video that people loved, and in Smite 2 I've come to love both playstyles quite equally while also fully acknowledging that full tank playstyle just isn't as viable right now. Which brings us to the culmination of all of this. Let's talk about if this new way of supporting is healthy for the overall game balance, and my thoughts on how we can fix high prot support builds. Smite 2 is on rocky ground, and I don't mean with its metas or god balance, I mean in general. The game itself could very well not exist soon. Now I don't say this to be a major bummer, but more so to bring up my point. I think the game has to pivot to a new angle to stay relevant. With the loss of esports, the competitive nature of Smite has taken a hit, and as such the game may need to pivot to some more fun ways of play, even if they are not as competitively balanced. And I say this as someone who is extremely competitive. Truly though, this full damage way of support is making the rounds because it has legs to stand on, and I think that's a good thing. We should be able to play in new and exciting ways and still find success. However, that should never come at the expense, and especially not close to the total erasure, of a different playstyle. There needs to be a balance found wherein a player could choose to utilize those higher damage supports and builds and still flourish one game, then switch to a full tank build the next with just as much success being possible. Because at the end of the day, a balanced state of play sees the player's level of success resting more so on their own actions and skills than anything else. All of this to say, what I think we need is not a hit on higher damage supports, but raising the viability of high prot build supports back up. I have a few ways in which I think that should happen. To start, certain stats should be hard capped, starting with penetration, and perhaps even look into the top prot items and toning them down a bit. Next up are two different options to 3k pots and their stacking ability. One is to revert that change. In my opinion, a match should not come down to who can get more 3k pots stacked faster to one-shot the enemy. It should come down to the better fight being set up and executed. Simply put, Smite should always come down to skill, not scaling. If you want to keep stacking 3 pots, then so be it. But we need to add 3k defense potions to the game as we had in Smite 1. Give the players the chance to scale their tankiness just as damage dealers can scale themselves. This will make tanky characters feel like they have actual use and ability to fight at very late stages, especially helping with sieging, as the 3k defense potions in Smite 1 gave you a 25% reduction in damage from structures. If you brought that back to Smite 2, tanks would instantly feel much more useful. Next up, I'd love a look into how fast damage scales on consecutive tower shots. As I stated earlier, it feels as though it scaled much too quickly, making taking those objectives a bit tough at certain points. Lastly is looking into the scaling of characters and perhaps bringing damage down in the game across the board. Now I know that's a contentious thing to say, and I don't need to bring up 9.5 right now for you Smite old heads. And to be clear, I don't think bringing damage down across the board is a valid solution, but hopefully the devs can quickly get a better grasp on what balanced scaling looks like, especially for hybrid characters. As in my opinion, it has been a little too high quite often. At the end of the day, the meta often has a mind of its own. It's nothing more than a coalescence of our collective games. We all influence each other to try new things and move in new directions, and I think that's a large part of the fun of Smite for me. Seeing your opponent smack you with some silliness just to replicate it yourself, or to get yelled at by your Masters ranked teammates for the 40th time because you locked in Nuwa support just to have them silent as a stone when you carry them to a win on that exact pick. But that may be more of a personal experience, so I'll be honest. Either way, all those experiences make Smite what it is. I'm not sure where the meta and the game itself will head, but one thing I do know is I'll be right here as it does. So earlier today, the patch notes came out. I already had this video and script everything for the last 4 days or so, and I've just been working on it. And then these patch notes came out. I want to show you this really quickly, take you to the patch notes here, because there's a lot of nerfs coming through for penetration right now, which tells you exactly what I'm saying. As the point of the video, one of the things that I recommended they need to do is take penetration down a little bit. I prefer more of just a hard cap solution, but taking off items was another thing I said because it makes sense. So Totem of Death, Executioner, Obsidian Shard, Titan's Bane, Heartseeker, Ratatouille, these items are losing a lot of their penetration. You can see at least 5% from a lot of these items, which is quite a bit, especially something like Totem of Death, which is an item made for penetration. Same thing with Executioner. Those are losing a lot of penetration there. And that's good. That's going to bring those higher protection builds up a little bit in the meta, hopefully. I'll kind of see how that feels, and maybe, I don't know if I'll make another video, but if you want to join my Discord server, it'll be linked in the top right in the description. It's called The Aquarium, and I'll probably give my thoughts there on how these Prot tanks are feeling once those changes go through in a few days. But it's not just that. We also have some big changes coming to structures. T1 towers, T2 towers, and phoenixes. Now, the biggest thing I want to talk about with these is they're actually losing penetration again, because that stat, whether it's on a god or it's on a freaking tower, is very strong. And my solution for these towers, kind of bringing them more in balance, was personally looking at the consecutive shot scaling, because the more shots you take from a structure, they stack up, they do more damage. I think that's a little high right now, but this could also completely work. They're bringing down the penetration, only gonna have 10% on T1 towers, 20% on T2 towers, 30% on phoenixes, and you got to look at the actual physical powers being brought down on every single one of these structures, right? So you bring down the penetration, you bring down the physical power, it's going to be hitting a lot softer. It's not going to hit you as hard, which is good for higher tanks, right? That means we can take more shots of it. The consecutive shots won't stack up as fast if just the lower base stats are here. Cool. I do also want to mention this is a really good change for higher damage supports, because if you're playing a higher damage or a full damage type support and you're building like that, then the towers don't hit as hard anyways, then you don't even need as much tankiness, you don't need as many tank items, protection items, to tank those towers. So while this change is good in bringing back those higher protection builds a little bit and letting us tank for longer and feel more useful, it's also going to be a boon for the same time for those higher damage support builds. So keep that in mind, especially though with these items. Protection items should feel a lot better with a lot of this penetration being taken out of the game. This is a great step in the right direction. Again, I won't know my total opinions until I really feel it in game, but I do really like this change. Made me very happy seeing this earlier. So I wanted to just make sure I threw that in here at the end of the video here and clarify to you guys that part of the things that I want to change, kind of what I suggested, is going through already, which is really cool to see. So I want to clarify that at the end here, as well, just to say thank you guys for watching. This is a really fun project to work on, honestly. I had like a 14-page script that I just had, and I got the bug to write, and I just started writing, and I kind of cranked it all out in one night, and it was a really fun time. It was a fun project to work on, and if you guys enjoyed it, you want to leave me a like to show me that, subscribe especially. We're really close to 2,000 subscribers on this channel. It'll be pretty sick to hit that, so I'd appreciate having you around. And again, join the Discord server. If you want to help me out in any way, more monetarily, you can check out my Smite Nexus. Use the code Roger on the Smite Nexus, I should say. Use Roger10 at checkout at Advanced GG. Those are 2 simple ways if you're going to get those products anyways. That can help me out as a small creator. But really, I appreciate you guys so much. And that is going to do it for me today. So as always, have a great day.